Donald Trump has always been a contradiction. A self-made man who inherited a fortune. A populist who spent his life with the elite. Someone who rails against fake news but is frequently caught with lies. Now perhaps the most significant contradiction yet.
We took action last night to stop a war. We did not take action to start a war.
This most isolationist of presidents who promised to extract America from the endless procession of Middle Eastern wars has, according to his critics at least, taken the country to the brink of the century's most dangerous conflict so far.
But according to this foreign policy analyst, even non-interventionists have to intervene from time to time.
I think there was a concern that the Iranians were beginning to believe that because President Trump is unwilling and does not want to increase large numbers in the Middle East, that he would not therefore be willing to use military force. And so they continue to look for those areas in which they could continue to press to see how far they could go. And he continued to say, do not threaten Americans, don't harm Americans. And when an American contractor was killed, then he responded showing that he wasn't bluffing.
As with many things, Donald Trump has defined his Iran policy as a repudiation of his predecessor.
He negotiated a disastrous deal with Iran, and then we watched them ignore its terms even before the ink was dry.
That deal was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, otherwise known as the Iran nuclear deal, signed in 2015. It was backed by the UN Permanent Five plus Germany. Iran agreed to curtail its nuclear program in return for an end to sanctions. It was no surprise when Mr. Trump withdrew from the deal in 2018. In its place, the new policy is known as maximum pressure, a return to hard-hitting economic sanctions designed to deprive Tehran of funds and persuade them to agree a more comprehensive deal. President Trump has been under pressure to strike back at Iran. The shooting down of an American drone in June almost led to a US military response, but President Trump pulled the order to strike at the last minute. But at the end of last month, a US civilian contractor was killed by a rocket attack on the US base at Kirkuk in Iraq, and then the attack on the US embassy in Baghdad over the new year. The US blamed the Iranian-backed fighters for both. If President Trump was looking to build a cross-party consensus in Washington, it didn't help that he's threatening to target Iranian cultural sites if Iran strikes back.
This is absolutely bonkers. Let's not try to sugarcoat it. When I was in the Army in Afghanistan 15 years ago, we couldn't hit any target that was even close to a library, much less a significant cultural site.
So what then is the Trump strategy?
This is a man who doesn't like U.S. troops in Afghanistan. He barely likes U.S. troops in Germany. So I don't think we're going to see a U.S. ground invasion or a major war with Iran, especially during an election year. But that being said, the U.S. is going to have to develop a new strategy on how to deal with Iran, at least for the duration of this administration. The policy was to get Iran back to the negotiating table. This seems very unlikely now.
What the man in the White House does next depends on how Iran decides to respond. On such unstable foundations does the world now rest.